Hi.
Hello. Yay.
Thanks for joining me. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Me too. I'm really nervous. I don't know why.
Oh no, you've been doing these like live stream things for so long now. You're a pro.
I was like, I don't know why I'm nervous. I think it's because you just don't know it's coming. And that's always nerve-wracking. Also, I don't really feel like I've talked to people other than my family since Fold ended. So
Fair, yeah.
What is going on in the world out there? Sam, what are you up to?
What am I up to?
Yeah.
Honestly, just this. I was saying it's like going to be kind of weird not, like you're our last interview. So I've been doing this for like 4 weeks, every Tuesday and Thursday. So what am I going to do next week, you know?
You're going to be like me. You're like, I don't know what to do for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, next time I go on live, I'm going to be like, what? Where am I? So, yeah, for everybody that's just come in, maybe they've seen like Jael's on live and want to know what's going on. This is Culture Calls. It's a interview series that Culture Brampton has been doing, like I said, for the last month. And today we're interviewing Jael. And I've been starting all of the Culture Calls with a land acknowledgement. So that's what I'm going to do now. So if you're in Brampton, like Jael and I, we're on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and before them, the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Huron, and Wendat. And today in Brampton, there's also many First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and other global Indigenous people that live among us today. And during my land acknowledgement, I've been recommending a different Indigenous artist for people to check out. And so far I've been doing all musicians because a lot of the people we're interviewing are musicians, but I wanted to relate it more to like the people that are tuning in today. So I found I guess like a spoken word poet. Her name is Helen Knott. I just kind of found out about her recently because it's not really like, this isn't really like my realm. But she's really cool. She wears so many hats. She's like a social worker, an author, a spoken word poet. She just does so many things. And so
if it's the same, Helen Knott was at Fold this year, actually.
Oh, no way.
yeah. She has a book. If it's the same one, she has a book called In My Own Moccasins, I want to say, I'm looking at it on my bookshelf right now. I'm going to grab it. Actually, it's really cute.
Yes, show the people.
Show the people. So this is her book. It's a memoir, and it was nominated for an award, and she's awesome. So yeah.
This is perfect.
Yeah, it's like we planned it.
Ooh. Yeah. Usually like I'll post like a song of all my artists that I've recommended. So for this one, I'll probably post like a spoken word piece and that book as well that you just showed us. So if anybody is like curious and wants to dive like deeper into her work, don't worry.
There's lots of ways.
Yeah. So today we're chatting with Jael. Do you want to maybe introduce yourself for folks that might not be familiar?
Sure. So my name's Jael. I live in Brampton. I am an author, and I'm also the founder and artistic director of the Festival of Literary Diversity, which is Canada's first festival that really centers marginalized authors and storytellers. And so we just finished our 5th festival. We did it all virtual this year. So if you're tuning in and you're thinking that sounds cool, because it does, you can go on YouTube and look up Fold 2020. And about, I want to say 10 of our sessions are there, all the panels that we did, including one with Helen Knott, Reconciliation and Resistance Part 1. And so you can have a peruse at all of the sessions we did.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And before we dive into your work, I wanted to ask a little bit about your relationship to Brampton. Like, did you grow up here? Did you come here later in life? What's your story?
Yeah, I am a later in life Bramptonian. I grew up in Mississauga, which is always seen as like the more popular cousin, I guess, in the Peel region, the cool cousin, whatever. And so I feel like many people who grow up outside of Brampton, when I found out we were moving to Brampton, my parents moved first, and then I met my husband. So then I was never leaving. But when I first found out, I wasn't super excited. I think there's a really, Brampton has kind of a bad reputation outside of Brampton, sometimes inside of Brampton. And when I moved here, though, I've just been really impressed. I love it. I feel like it's underrated and under-celebrated. It's the reason I put the Fold here, because I just thought Brampton does diversity really well in some areas. Some areas we can always improve, but I think it's just been a really great place for me to grow as an artist and for me to get connected and for me to build something. And so I'm really a super proud, late blooming Bramptonian.
Yeah, when you mentioned, or like when I first heard about the Fold, I think I think we had met somewhere, and you were just like, "Oh, I do this thing," and I just assumed that like you live here, but it happens like in Toronto or like somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then when you mentioned like, yeah, we do it at the Rose and like around Brampton, I was like really surprised, because I guess that's not like what a lot of people do, but it's nice to also see like someone doing it and it going well.
Yeah, and it's been the thing that's been really surprising and good and hard. I think growing a Brampton-based audience is probably one of the most challenging things about Fold, because I think even in Brampton, you're just sort of used to going elsewhere for the things that you like to do in terms of art and culture. I think Brampton is a young city. It's one of the youngest cities in Canada. And as a result, our art, our culture scene is also young, which means it's being produced in some ways by a lot of young folks. And then there's sort of the expectation that like when you make it, you go elsewhere. And that can be true. I mean, in some art forms, that's what you do. You're not going to be a movie star and like settle down in Brampton very easily. That's just not going to work at this point. But I think it means that everything's new. Everything, the opportunities, the new ideas, a lot of them are coming from a whole different generation, and that's exciting to be a part of. Yeah.
I always refer to Brampton as like a blank canvas, because it's just so new that you can kind of there's like no rules, I guess, or like expectations in place for a lot of things, so you can just like go wild and. You
can go wild, and I think the city as a result is really like excited to see the success and growth. It's not crowded at this point. There's like, I literally want to say like maybe 5 to 10 of us doing festivals in Brampton compared to like thousands in Toronto. So there's a lot more support, a lot more opportunity to sort of work together and figure things out and rally together to sort through some things. So that's really exciting.
I have a bunch of questions about the Fold, but before I get to it, I wanted to ask about the book that you're working on, Gutter Child. I'd love to just like learn a little bit about, I guess like whatever you want to share at this point, but what it's about, or like
what is it about?
You want people to know. Yeah.
What is it? So my first book was called, let's see if I have a picture.
Yes, visual aids.
Have copies of your book next to your desk, and I believe I do. Oh, there it is. It's got paper under it. So my first book was The Stone Thrower, and this is a memoir about my father. My father was the first Black quarterback to win the Grey Cup, and so I'll just do a little bit of that. And so my first book was a memoir about his life, and then I turned that into a children's book called The Stone Thrower. You might be able to see it if I just tilt like that. My children's.
Oh, Jael, come back! I'm frozen.
And then my children's book came out. It was about the same thing. And so when I was finished those books, I really wanted to write fiction. I wanted to make up a story. I didn't want to have to do any more research or deal with truth. I just wanted everything to be made up. But I was really stuck by a question, and I'm working on my dad's life, was thinking about what it means to grow up in a world that's designed for your failure. And specifically thinking about the civil rights movement in the States and the laws and the American governance and Trayvon Martin. There was all these different sort of stories going on that really showed me that American politics were designed for the success of some and the failure of others. And so I wanted to create a world where that same sort of premise exists, where from the outset, one group is set up to kind of fail and the other group is not. And what kinds of decisions young people make when they grow up in that kind of system. What good choices can they make? What difficult choices do they face? And what are some of the consequences of like the world, the choices, et cetera, et cetera. And so Gutter Child is a world that's designed for failure in a lot of ways. And it's about what young people do when they face those odds. And it was really exciting for me to work on and hard because, I mean, I think the ending and the story, it was sort of like, you know, what do I want to say about life? What do I want to say about the way the world exists and the way we live and the way we treat people? And so, you know, the last stages of editing have been the most difficult because I think I've had to really hunker down and decide like what I feel about life, how I think about life, and how that influences what I'm writing and what I'm giving the world. So that's Gutter Child. It centers around the life of one young woman named Elamina and the friends she makes and the choices she makes as a result of being from a place called the gutter.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that involves a lot of like, I guess, emotional labor as a writer to like dive into topics like that as a Black woman in our current society. So that's, I don't know. I like read a little bit about, I think I tried to Google it, like Gutter Child, but I didn't realize like the full like premise that you just mentioned. So when do you think?
I mean, I think I wish I could write funny stories. I've always wanted to write romance. Maybe I will one day. But it doesn't seem to be, even when I start them, I have like outlines for romance novels. I have an outline for a really funny book premise, but it just doesn't seem to roll off me. And so I feel guilty sometimes about writing these stories that are difficult, but I also feel like I grew up not dealing with hardship, not dealing with politics, just sort of like living a quite comfortable, privileged life. You know, I've faced racism at various times, but it wasn't the kind that really held me back. And so I've spent my adult years really wrestling with why that is and what the consequences of privilege are even. You know, what you miss, what you lose, what you don't get involved in, what you then don't understand, what then you don't feel grounded in. And so I think my books for me are sort of a going back and unpacking the dangers of that and really wrestling with, you know, the realities of life and not avoiding them. So I keep joking around that I'm going to write a story about like a suburban family doing nothing next, just so I can like lighten my mental load. But I don't think it's going to happen. My gut is telling me the next story will also be a little bit difficult. But, you know, I think I hope difficult means important. I hope difficult means helpful, maybe even more than anything else.
Yeah, like just even from what you've said, I feel like you can't read a book like that and not like kind of like think critically about the world around you. So I think it'll be like good for a lot of people. Yeah. So,
well, there was this one too, they were asking like, there's this big question about who do you write for? And I think for me, Gutter Child is very much about, it's very much for 14-year-old me. It's a book that like I needed to read then to see the world differently. And, you know, I went probably 6, almost 10 more years before I really started dealing with it. So I want a book that sort of punches that 14-year-old socially.
I think there's a couple questions in the chat and like don't feel like obligated to answer anything you don't want to, but there's one, it says, I'm sure you can read it too, but like, have you ever dealt with any racism in the publishing world and the industry not understanding certain perspectives or discourse around race in Canada?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think Fold emerged because I felt that publishing in Canada was racist and ableist and a whole bunch of other things. So, what they do, what they used to do, what they still do in the Canadian publishing, they kind of pigeonhole stories that are written by folks of color and folks from marginalized communities. There's certain kind of narratives around disability that people are really comfortable with, like the sort of rise from the ashes story or the sidekick kind of storyline. And when it came to actually as a writer, you see in a lot of festivals prior to Fold, you'd have an entirely white lineup, even if it was in, I think anywhere, and the lineup of entirely white folks is just not a great program, to be honest. Yeah. And so there's that kind of racism. When there started to be more invitations for folks of color, they were often pigeonholed. Like, so I was at one festival where the entire lineup was white, except for 3 folks of color, and we were all on the same panel talking about writing home. So it's those kinds of things where, writing home as though home isn't Canada for me. And there's those kinds of nuances that I feel are really rooted in a kind of racism, a lack of understanding about race, culture, etc. So there's a lot of that. I share the one story that was really interesting for me. When I came out with my children's book, they make a description about your book and about like the blurb essentially for it and the marketing blurb that's going to go out to all the booksellers, etc. And the blurb for The Stone Thrower was that it was about a boy who grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. And I didn't see it till late. And I was like, wrong side of the tracks. What does that mean? And the reality is my dad grew up in a segregated community. So it was an all Black community. It wasn't the wrong side of the tracks. It was the only side of the tracks he was allowed to live in. And so this idea that, the Black community is wrong or ghetto or broken or flawed, like that kind of thing. And the woman who had written it and the folks who had looked at it, like a whole bunch of people had seen this and not thought anything of it. So that's, one example. But and I had this conversation online. These are good people, nice people. It's that kind of difficult racism that I think you have to deal with because it's like, they felt so bad and they felt so sorry, but really what they needed to do was unpack where that came from and why they all saw that and didn't notice it and why it went through to print. So it's those kinds of things that I've seen personally, and I know others who've had it even worse, especially when you're dealing with multiple languages and you're bringing in other cultures that you're from, that you live in, etc. Canadian publishing also used to do the horrible thing of appropriation, where they just let people write stories that they just were not well suited to writing. Yeah.
And are those kind of the experiences that led to the creation of Fold, or was it something like a different moment?
Yeah, that was at the heart of it. At the heart of it was just that I saw a lack of understanding about how to program for marginalized communities. I saw a lot of people programming these huge name authors or these major name authors, many of whom are white at the time, although that's changed as well. But just not getting the nuance that diverse, marginalized writers, we want to talk about craft, we want to talk about writing, we want to talk about creating characters. When a writer publishes a book, I think they've established themselves as a writer who's qualified to talk about craft. And I think I wanted to create a festival where diverse authors didn't just have to be experts on diversity. They could also be experts on writing, on craft, on doing workshops. It was very rare to see people of color programmed as workshop leaders. And I think the mentality was, hey, let's get this big name author that will drive people to do a workshop. But really, people just want to do a workshop on fiction. And most people don't know an author by name. There's a very small percentage of people when you do a workshop who know you by name and come because it's you. Most people come because the topic is good and they assume the programmers have their heads on right. So that's sort of been the philosophy we've taken. We start with our most marginalized voices. We start with the voices that are most difficult to find or the most underrepresented. So disabled writers are heavily underrepresented in our industry. Black women were heavily underrepresented. You sort of would have an Essie Adujan who has won the Giller twice, and they would sort of invite her everywhere. And that was the only Black woman you ever saw. And so trying to really combat who is visible is a big part of Fold. And then I think I also, like, on a selfish standpoint, I share sometimes, when my first book came out, I wasn't invited to a single festival. And so I think I wanted to create a space so that by the time I had another book out, there might be a place I would actually be invited because I had made it myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I love stories where people like create their own opportunities.
Yeah.
And like kind of open doors along the way as well, which is what you've done with the Fold. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to talk a little bit around, I guess, like the evolution of the Fold, like maybe pre-COVID, and then we'll talk about like the virtual Fold and how has it grown in like the 4 years that you did it in Brampton.
Yeah. So the first year we did Fold was 2016. And I don't know what I was thinking. I mean, we had 2 years to plan it. I came up with the idea. I worked with a couple people and a board to get it sort of off the ground. And then we announced it officially in 2015 that in 2016 this would be happening. And we got a lot of interest, a lot of excitement. I was featured on the cover of Cool Inquirer, which is like the main publishing magazine in Canada. And they called me an activist, and I was like, okay, here we go. Let's see what happens. And then we did the festival at PAMA, largely. It was at Peel Art Gallery, Museum and Archives in downtown Brampton. Most of the events were there. And, you know, that space seats like 80 people in a room max. And so it was really like packed in our first year, which was really nice. It had a really like quaint, cozy, like people were close, obviously pre-COVID. And it went really well. We didn't have like blazing high numbers. I want to say it was like 500 people in attendance that first year. And we've sort of creeped up about 100 to 200 every year. So it's grown. We grew out of PAMA to the point that we can only do one event there. And even that event gets sold out. So we have events at City Hall. And then maybe 2 years ago, we started at the Rose. And that's been a really exciting evolution because the Rose is an actual event space. So they have tech, they have all the pieces you need are already built into the actual space so that when you hold an event there, you have like all the support you need. When we do events at City Hall, we have to bring in, you know, microphones and speakers and, you know, all these things. We had to have to set up one day and then at night tear it all down because there's no security. So the Rose has been a really exciting moment because now we get to see our live events evolve. We have options of growing up to 800 people in this space, which is really great. So we were really excited approaching this 5th anniversary to be in the Rose. We were looking forward to having school groups there, like in large numbers for the first time. We were looking forward to a couple of major events in the Rose. And so it was a bit of a hit when we found out we were, based on COVID-19, that we weren't going to be able to have the festival. But we were also already doing things online. We had a webinar series called Fold Academy, where people can do writing workshops all year long online. So we had been doing things like that. We had seen what worked, what didn't work, what technology worked, what didn't work. And so by the time it was like almost announcing like that May events were going to be canceled, we were already prepared that if we needed to transition, I think we were actually prepared just to transition. Like there just came a point where I was like, let's just plan for it. We're not announcing now, but let's just plan for it. So my colleague, Amanda Leduc, she and I converted our 26 events from our live festival into 20 virtual events for our 2020 5th anniversary festival. So that was a bit of a like, like a 180. But what I would say, maybe 90% or more of that has been an entirely positive experience. We've been able to reach a much wider audience geographically. We've been able to hit people who have always wanted to come to Fold but never could. It's been difficult to transition our sort of tourism part of Fold and market to a tourism-based audience. And not having any physical event meant we could focus all of our attention on that wider beyond Brampton audience. And so it's been really exciting to see the response and to see how that all came together. We had 7,000 people tune in to Fold events over the course of the weekend. And we've had an additional, 500 to 1,000 people log on and watch events on their own time since then.
That's wild. Because even because I was originally going to DJ for the Fold, and then that went virtually as well. And during that event, I had no idea like what to expect in terms of like attendance, I guess. And then I like randomly like hovered over the participants little button, and there was like 300 people in there, which was not at all like what I would have guessed. So
no. And even if we'd done it in person, we would have maxed out at 100. So for our authors and for the audiences, I think they just got to see way more people than they would have in person. And that's been really exciting too, to see, to try and figure out, it's always been my mission to really raise the profile of marginalized authors in Canada in particular. I'm really interested. I think we have phenomenal writers in Canada, just like a phenomenal, from YA to kid lit to adult fiction to thrillers to all of it. I think we have a phenomenal group of writers. And I really believe like Canada itself, even our major booksellers should just take more pride in that. And so raising the visibility of those writers, both in Canada and beyond, is just a really exciting thing for me.
Do you think in the future, will you have virtual components like for the Fold?
Yeah, I mean, I think 2020 will be the year that changed it all. I can't see us not doing virtual events in the future. I think for me, the goal is to have in-person events because I love Brampton. I love bringing authors here. I think despite the fears around COVID-19 and the realities of COVID-19, I don't think we ever want to lose touch with each other. I don't think we ever want to lose connections with each other. And so I really, as soon as it's safe, want to have really great events where people can meet authors and get their books signed and hopefully maybe even like hug each other every now and again. I really want that. But I also really want to continue to build the virtual audience and to build our virtual, like our videos. I love, like we've had great conversations in the past that are available. Audible records some of the events and actually puts them on audible.ca/fold. There's actual content from 2018. So I love the idea that you can go back and listen to conversations that for me are quite timeless. So the virtual experience allows us to do that as well, to create more content, to involve more authors. I'm really curious, honestly, about how we can incorporate authors who maybe would never be able to travel themselves to Fold, whether that's because of a disability, because of where they live, because of the work they do. I'm really interested in how we can connect them. One of our authors, Kahiso Malope, she had this fabulous conversation online with these three authors. One was from, I think she's from South Africa. So I think one of the authors was from South Africa. One was from England. And they were having this phenomenal conversation about race. And I was like, this should be a panel at Fold. But like to have those authors all come together for Fold would be very challenging in a number of different ways. But I thought, maybe we can make that conversation happen in a virtual event. And so I'm excited to look at programming differently for next year. Yeah.
It's funny that you talked about accessibility because there's literally a question that just came in around whether Fold had more engagement online from an accessibility point of view. And you kind of just touched on like the fact that you might have.
And we also do captioning. So we caption all of our events. So we do have more connection, more engagement because on an accessibility standpoint, there's a lot of writers in the disabled community in particular who it's much easier for them to attend a virtual event. I also, it's really important to say though that our in-person events still and will always be accessible because I think it's important to make things easy and accessible online. And that's to me from a physical standpoint, but also from a financial standpoint. Our online events are free. But then I also think there's a point in which people come and pay and experience the event in a different way. And I think it's important that everybody is able to do both. Not just, you know, this is where you go if you can't quite get in the room or if there's stairs to get in. It's like, that's, because, if virtual stuff was like purely for accessibility,
it almost like makes that community feel like an afterthought in a way.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
for sure.
for you.
I think it's, and I think it's the way, I mean, CanLit, even more than their racism, has been horribly ableist and continues to be. I mean, there are publishers whose buildings aren't accessible. There are venues where readings and things are held that aren't accessible to get into, or that don't have bathrooms that are accessible. And when you do those things, it says to people, you're not welcome. We don't want you here. And I know, nice people are programming it, so they want to think like that's not what we're actually saying, but it is actually what you're saying. And you even have to be really careful about it when you're in venues that are small and they don't have enough room for a wheelchair to get around. You're still saying like, we want to make this as difficult as possible for you to enjoy your experience. That is what it actually says. So one of the things, like for me, even with if I happen to go on a book tour, if that's still a thing, it's been really important for me to say, like, I don't do events in venues that are not accessible, bathrooms, doors, etc., and to really make that a priority, because I don't think people change until you do. Yeah, until there's that like pressure to change through stuff like that. Okay, well, this always happens. It always becomes 12:30. Like it always becomes 12:30. No, 30 minutes later, it's always 12:30. Yeah, I don't know how it happens. But I kind of I've been ending off all of the culture calls, asking all of our guests, like, how can we support you as an artist, and how, like, as a community, we can support you. Like, if there's anything you want to plug, any like pre-orders for Gutter Child or like anything. Pre-orders for Gutter Child. I don't even know if that's possible, but if it is, feel free. Okay, so I have a couple of things. I'll say personally first, and then I'll move to like more professional stuff. And I like to provide examples that are both financial and non-financial. So obviously, I would love it if you bought the books that I write. That's great. The Stone Thrower memoir and the Stone Thrower Kids book are both available in bookstores. And if your bookstore doesn't have it, just ask them. And that's another great way you can do that. Another thing you can do, it's also available as an audiobook. Another thing you can do, and it's a great Father's Day present for fathers or people who like fathers. So, yeah. Another thing you can do is you can go on sites like Amazon and Chapters and actually review the book if you've read it. And that's a really helpful way, totally free, but reviews help raise the profile of a book. And then when people read a book that's similar, you're more likely to see that book pop up. And I would say that's true of me. Also, if you've just read a great book by a marginalized author, like, find their book, review it, say something nice about it, because that's really helpful. Goodreads too. And then for Fold, I would say three kind of things. In terms of financially, you can go to Canada Helps and donate to the Fold Foundation, and that's always really great. You can come to our events when we have them, whether they're online or in person. That's always like, yay, my favorite, because then I get to meet you. I think that's selfishly why I like that one. And then you can follow us on social media. So we're on Instagram at The Fold. We're on Twitter at The Fold _. The Fold, just The Fold, is a band, and they get lots of messages from Fold followers, but it's the wrong one. So ours has the FOLD in like rainbowish letters and an underscore at the end of our name. So make sure it's that one. And you can go to our website and sign up for our newsletter. Our website is thefoldcanada.org. And those are the big ways right now. Yeah, go to events. Follow us online, share us with other people. If you know someone who's a writer or a book lover, share the information about Fold with them as well. Or teachers as well. They really need Fold. Oh, okay, cool. Yes. If you have an English teacher, so if you're watching this and you're a teen, you have a teen, share Fold with your English teacher. Yeah, that's smart. I like that. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for chatting. I'm trying to think if I have any like last final words for Culture Calls. This is the last one. Yeah, we are doing things in the future, like, because we're still going to be isolating after today. So forever. Yeah. Feels like forever. Yeah. So we have some stuff kind of like up our sleeve that we're working on. So like, this won't be like the very last that people will see me. So yeah, just if you liked this conversation, make sure you're following Cultural Brampton to find out
what we're doing next. I think that's all I can say on that.
And Sam, just so you know, get yourself ready for next year because I'm having you moderate one of our events. Just saying.
Ooh, okay, I'm down. Yes, people just like have me play music, which is great, but I'm also available for speaking things.
Exactly. So I'm like, you know what, girl, you have to get up and ask some other people some questions so I can watch.
Yeah. Yes, I'm down. We could do that.
Cool. To date.
Cool. Well, I think that's everything. Those are my last kind of like things. It's just I'll be back. But yeah, I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks to everyone that's in here and has been kind of tuning in to all of these culture calls and sharing with their friends. Yeah, it's been really fun. So excited to share what we're working on next. But
very cool.
Yeah. Okay. Bye, everyone.
See ya.